What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast, episode number 89, as the Mets drop a series to the Cincinnati Reds, similar to what they did at Citi Field, which means that they do not have the tiebreaker now when, or if it's needed, I should say. Hopefully that does not end up being the case. But yeah, just a sloppy series by the Mets once again. Once again, a lot of concerns throughout the series, similar to what we had earlier in the year, which does raise the question of, was some of the things that we saw with this offense the past few weeks kind of, a flash in the pan type of thing? Or is there stuff that, just was off this week? We'll talk about it, though. Before we jump in everything, I ask that you please leave a like on your way into the episode. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. We also had the debut of Brandon Sproat, which we'll talk about. So plenty to get into here. But yeah, overall, like I said, a very, very disappointing series because the Mets had an opportunity to really go into the series and put the Reds away, put them out of the question of making the playoffs. You probably would have to be a little worried about the Giants still, but at least you have the tiebreaker there. But with this, you had an opportunity to bury a team and you didn't. And that is a concern in itself because I'd like to see this team show a little bit of guts in that regard where it's like, yeah, let's put this team out of sight, out of mind. Any shot of winning the division, even though they're going into a series against the Phillies, it's gone. Like they could sweep the series, and I will not care because you know what the biggest problem is that I'm taking away from these past few weeks. I really do not care anymore if they beat the Phillies because it's great, it's fun, but what about the rest of the teams that you play? Because to me, they have not shown me enough against other teams outside the Phillies over the past few weeks to tell me and change my mind from some of the things that we talked about a few weeks ago. And after that Philly series, I was kind of sitting here saying, okay, if things start to turn right in September here, that's all that matters because it's about getting hot at the right time. They have not built that momentum up at all. And that's the thing that is really troubling me the most about all of this because you dropped that series to the Marlins. You beat the Tigers, but some things just weren't crisp enough, like the pitching. And then this series, realistically, you probably should have got swept. But game one, Diaz pulled a magic act there to bail you out. But realistically, they have not played good enough baseball, and we're starting to see some tendencies creep back in that we saw earlier in the year. When you look at the fact that they are struggling against bullpens, struggling against elite pitching, which has kind of been a problem even with the offense producing, but now the runners in scoring position thing is becoming a problem again. To where, Matt, I'll let you jump in. Even if the Mets do beat the Phillies in this series, I kind of think both fan bases would be like after that because Phillies fans would be upset that they can't put the Mets away for the division. And, they would feel, okay, we could beat other teams but the Mets. And then Mets fans, I think, are going to feel, okay, that's cool and all, but are you going to be able to beat other teams? Do you feel that same way? But overall, your thoughts in general with that?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed in this series. I didn't expect them to go into this series and sweep, just because. I mean, listen, we look at the Reds, roster in total, their lineup, their rotation. Obviously, they don't have a ton of like studs on that roster, apart from like Ellie De La Cruz and Hunter Green on the pitching staff. But overall, for the amount of money they spend and for the fact that their ownership just doesn't care about spending money on their team, they actually do have like a little bit of a feisty, solid under the radar roster, which credit to them, I guess, because they see that they're in an opportunity to fight for a playoff spot, and they're giving teams a ton of trouble. And even then, they struggled going to this series because when I was listening on the radio when I was listening to the second game, they even mentioned that the Reds coming to this series, they lost 10 out of the last 13, so they knew that they had to pick up the slack. And of course, they take this series 2 out of 3 from the Mets naturally. But look, overall, like I said, I'm disappointed in this series just because, like you said, like they had a chance to bury the Reds, and instead, and listen, I still think the Mets are going to make the playoffs, but it's just the fact that I really wanted to see them just take care of a team that was quote unquote on lesser ground than them because. Again, and this comes back to the point which we've stated, from doing the podcast from this year, doing the podcast from last year, and even just watching, because this group has been around since 2021, 2022. And we know that the tendency that this group has play up the competition, be able to take down teams like the Phillies, like the Tigers, like the Mariners. But then for some reason, when teams like the Marlins, teams like the Reds stroll in, it's like all of a sudden it's like they get loose and they want to play these, very, not even competitive, but not like even like competitive to where it's like both teams are really good. Like the only reason why these games are competitive is because the Mets take their foot off the gas and they let teams like the Reds and Marlins actually play up, or not even play up to their level, but they play down to their level. So and again, it's just disappointing considering that when you look at the pitchers that were going through the series, you want to see David Peterson bounce back a little bit. I thought he was better than his last outing, but again, like that's not a high bar because he got lit up for 8 runs in his first 2 innings against the Marlins. Did I like his stuff early in the game? Sure, but then he tailed off as the outing went on. Obviously, we'll talk about Jonah Tong because for some reason people are freaking out when they shouldn't be because again, it's his second major league start, and apart from the 3 home runs that he let up, I thought Tong was fine. Obviously, he's going to make adjustments, but we'll get more into that. And then obviously, the big thing that we're going to talk about in this outing is, Brandon Sproat came up. He looked very good. I thought he had very good control of the secondary stuff. Did have some command issues here and there, but overall, 6 innings, 3-run ball. I mean, listen, listen. Some people might say, that's nothing too special, but considering, where the fact, where we are with this pitching staff, we're struggling for 6 innings, 3 runs out of any of our starting pitchers. More on the veteran side per se, but yeah, I thought Sproat came up yesterday. He looked fine. The main problem for this series was overall just the offense took a step back. I mean, and really the offense was non-existent apart from the first 2 innings of the first game where you saw, Vientos hit a home run. Soto came up clutch with a couple big hits in this series. But overall, like I said, apart from the first 2 innings in that first game, the offense completely disappeared. You really got little run support for Jonah Tong in his second start. And then for Brandon Sproat, you give him 1 run courtesy of a Brett Beatty home run. But other than that, they were totally shut down by Hunter Green, which that's something we're going to talk about again with the whole, approach and the fact that they looked lifeless against the one of the top pitchers in Major League Baseball. But yeah, overall, just a disappointing series for me.
Yeah, disappointment is definitely the fitting word for this because it's like you want to see them beat up on these teams and prove their worth. And sure, you could argue that it's a blessing in disguise that they beat the good teams and maybe struggle against the bad teams. But I could tell you right now as well, you still need to beat up on these bad teams. And some of the tendencies, even against these bad teams, kind of creep into the games against the good teams to where you're not going to have the fortune of facing a guy like a guy like Brady Singer who you couldn't even hit. You're not gonna have the fortune of playing that in the playoffs. And that's what worries me is the Hunter Green game yesterday. And the thing that I highlighted the most when we did our podcast with Mets Weekly last week, the thing that I highlighted the most was I want to see them. I don't need them to light the world on fire against Hunter Green. I don't need them to go out there and score 5, 6 runs to shut me up. But go ahead and, get like 3 or 4 runs, scrape away a little bit against them. And then you get to that Reds bullpen that isn't anything great. And you have an opportunity here. But instead, they virtually get no hit. Outside of that Brett Beatty home run, they had no hits against Hunter Green. 12 strikeouts for him, and he only allowed 2 walks. You know what you're going to face because I'm so tired of the tip your cap thing. You're going to face elite pitching in the playoffs. I don't know how many times I have to reiterate this point when we're in September, but that is going to be the type of pitchers that you face when it matters the most. And the inability this team has to, again, I don't need them to light up these pitchers, but to be able to just scrape away and like we talked about last week, win some close games here and there. Like you shouldn't be in close games with the Reds, but at least win these close games against the Reds. That's the problem is the inability to find a way to win these close games. And once again, I mean, this team still has not had a comeback win from the 8th inning on. And we're in September. And we have how many series left? We have the Phillies, Rangers, Padres, Nationals, Cubs, Marlins. We have 5 series. I just counted it left, 5 to 6. And
Yeah.
this team has yet to, 5 series, yet to have a comeback win. It's like, you're going to need to find a way to do that in the playoffs. And the fact that you can't do that in the regular season against this team, too, nonetheless, which I thought maybe they would when Soto hit that home run. But no, you have Brandon Nimmo, who was not coming through at all. Pete Alonso, I'm very disappointed with what I saw from him in this series, and it has been snowballing with him lately. He left a continent on base throughout the series. And if we were doing the Mets weekly studs and duds, he'd be my dud because it is so infuriating how he came up small. But overall, like your thoughts on that with the offense, especially against Hunter Green not hitting against them.
Yeah, I mean, even you touched upon it with Hunter Green. It's like when we were talking about it on the podcast with Carson, which make sure you guys check out Mets Weekly because I believe they're going to do a podcast also breaking down this series today as well. Whether that's at 4 o'clock or whatever, but make sure you guys check them out because they do fantastic work over there as well. But yeah, I said with the Hunter Green thing, I'm like, listen, I don't need you to go out and dominate Hunter Green for like 7 runs and only make him pitch 5 innings. Would I complain about that? Absolutely not, because I would love to see this team just tee off on a very good pitcher. But I was just more asking, like, okay, let's see if you could scrape off 3 to 4 runs, make them work, maybe only pitch 5, 6 innings. At the latest, just let them get into the 6th inning. But at least try to make them work and drive out the pitch count. But just the way that first inning went, and listen, I don't like to put in too much stock into how first inning goes because the ball game is so long to where you have 8 more innings, to where you can put up runs. But just the way how Lindor, Soto, and Pete went down in that first inning, I was like, yeah, we're in for a long we're in for a long day today. Because I mean, listen, Lindor put up some of a semi fight, got sent down the splitter. But then when I see Hunter Green just pump 3 fastballs right by Juan Soto and he's nowhere close to it, and then I see Pete again striking out on an inside fastball, I'm like,
5 straight
yeah,
strikeouts for Green to start.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be a long day. And the one thing I was very disappointed, and I even tweeted it out, and even you tweeted it out during the game yesterday when I think Hunter Green got to the 6th inning. I was like, because let's not forget, like this team relatively over the past couple weeks, last month, has been very good in terms of hitting with runners in scoring position, and most notably something that we crucified them a lot this year was not being ready to hit the fastball. And over the last couple weeks, they've been hitting the fastball relatively well. But I watched this game and I just see Hunter Green. And listen, we all knew what the game plan was for Hunter Green because when you can constantly throw a 101, 102 fastball at a very good rate for strikes, that's going to be his main weapon and that's going to be his main strikeout pitch. And to me, I just did not like seeing every single hitter go up there and they just didn't look prepared at all to hit a fastball. For some reason, they reverted back to relying to sitting on Hunter Green's breaking stuff, whether that was a splitter or a slider. But I'm like, and it's like, listen, earlier on in the game, sure, like you could maybe say, but like the fact that I mentioned, where was the adjustment specifically after the 2nd or 3rd inning? Because if that's his game plan after the 2nd or 3rd inning, make that adjustment. Sit on the fastballs in a 2-strike count. And we saw it later in the game, 4th inning, 5th inning, 6th inning, 7th inning. Hunter Green was striking them out with the same game plan. Attack with the fastball early, sprinkle in the all speed stuff in the middle of the count, and then blow them away with the fastball. And like I said, nobody was prepared to hit the fastball whatsoever. So to me, like I said, I did not like at all that none of them were making adjustments whatsoever. And again, that goes back on the hitting coach because what is he telling them in the dugout? But listen. I'm not going to get too much into the Chavez thing because you guys know how me and Evan both feel about him and the fact that he shouldn't be here past this season. But like I said, that's another thing. But the thing that I also didn't like, and I talked about it also on the podcast that we did with Carson, I said that this series I wanted them to win the first two games because one, like I said, I wanted them to win the series, but second of all, I didn't want them having to go into that third game needing to um, beat Hunter Green because again we know how they fare sometimes against really good pitching. And second of all, I didn't want to put all that pressure on Sproat to go out there and have to pitch a really solid game because, again, like I said, it was his first major league start. He already had a ton of pressure on him. I just wanted to ease a little bit of pressure on him. And again, they lost that second game. And listen, credit to Sproat because, like I said, he went out there, he gave you 6 really good innings of 3-run ball. It's just, again, like when the offense is not doing anything against Hunter Green and when you're only getting, 1 run courtesy of a Brett Beatty home run, and you're only because I believe in that outing. Hunter Green went 7 innings. He only gave up the 1 run, 1 hit, and 2 walks. Like that is not good enough. And then sure, they had the nice little comeback, or at least attempting a comeback in the ninth inning where you had the Soto home run. Pete got on base through an error. Nimmo had a single. Martin unfortunately grounds into a game-ending double play. But it's like, okay, cool. Like you had that nice little attempt there, but when you leave yourself that little amount of time to get runs and to get a stretch going, like it's going to be tough. And like I said, when you get to the ninth inning and you need all those runs, it's not very likely that you're going to come back. And just like you mentioned with the fact that they haven't had a win this year where they were trailing in the ninth inning, the Mets are actually the only team this year that don't have a win while trailing in the ninth inning because the Orioles were the other team and they did that this weekend against the Dodgers, which that was a crazy ending to that game. But obviously we're not a Dodger, we're not a Oriole channel, so we're not going to touch upon that. But yeah, I mean, same issues are just hurt this team in the series.
Yeah, and it's some of the issues that we talked about last year too, where it's like the bipolar offense. But also, don't question the hitting coach because when things go wrong, it's not his fault. It's only on him when things are going right. Then you got to like sing his praises, and he's the second coming of Christ. But then he's gonna post the edits when things are going wrong about how it's not his fault and he's not even playing the game. I digress though with that little rant there. But yeah, I mean, just like even outside of the adjustments, the poor hitting decisions, how about the base running too? And I don't kill Lindor as much for the one in the first inning of that game too, but oh my goodness, that him stealing third with when he's already in scoring position with Juan Soto up there, you can't do that. You can't. And I think this team needs to start holding back a little bit on stealing bases a bit too. Just because it has happened a good amount of times as of lately where they're starting to get a little too happy with the stolen bases and they're getting caught a little bit too much. And, that's part of the issue here because you're taking the bat out of your best hitter's hands at times, with Lindor or sometimes Soto when Pete's up or Nimmo's up. He's going up there and getting caught trying to steal a base. And it's like, you're only hurting yourselves more, especially when I get that you're trying to like squeeze some runs out late, but at the same time, you need to stay in scoring position when your best hitters are up, especially with that one though. I mean, you're stealing third. It's not even like Lindor's going first to second to get in scoring position. He's already in scoring position. What were your thoughts on that overall with the base running and just like do you think they need to start to cut back on that?
No, listen, I agree with you. I didn't have a problem with the first one because, listen, you're in the first inning. Lindor obviously leads off that game with a single. You want to put instant pressure on the Reds. And listen, I've said this over this year and most notably, like sometimes like whenever we're texting the group chat, the Mets base stealing strategy and most notably the strategy that Anton Richardson has implemented, it's a very risky strategy. Like when it works, like you get really good jumps and most of the time you're going to be successful in terms of stealing bases, but it's also very risky because if the pitcher steps off, you're caught dead in the water. So like I said, it's a risk and reward strategy. And to be fair, the Mets have been very good with the strategy because I mean they've been one of the best teams in the league this year. in terms of stealing bases, and they have one of the highest success rates in terms of stealing bases. So the first inning one with Lindor, trying to to put pressure right on the Reds, I didn't have a problem with that. The one in the fifth inning, though, like I just, to me, I don't get it, because at that point you're down 4-1. There's one down in that inning. Lindor gets a double, and you have Juan Soto up, who's been, over the past couple weeks, last couple months, has been very good in terms of hitting with runners scoring position. And right away, and again, it's like, that's the thing. Like, you're down by 3 runs. Like, okay, like, you need to start chipping away, but that second run is not the all end and be all. Like, even still, if it was like a 4-3 game, let's say, or even a 4-4 game, I would still not agree with it, just because you're already in scoring position, and Lindor has good speed. It's not like Peter Marte are at second base, to where, okay, maybe even if you get a single, it's not a guarantee that they're going to score. But Lindor's not the fastest player in the major leagues, but Lindor still has solid speed for his build type. So to me, and listen, I get that they want to be aggressive, but like I said, when you have Soto up there, with the fact that he's been lights out, hitting with runners scoring position, I did not agree with that whatsoever. And in terms of them, pulling back on the base stealing, I don't think it's so much about pulling back. I think it's just being maybe a little bit more patient, per se, because listen, the Mets have been getting away with the strategy for about a solid 2 to 3 months now, and teams are starting to make adjustments to them. So I don't think it's more necessarily about, like I said, pulling back and stopping the strategy of base running. I think it's just a case of, okay, teams are making adjustments to you. Now you have to readjust to them, and make it more difficult for them again to maybe to pick up a sign or something that shows, okay, that in this situation I'm going to be stealing here. So yeah, listen, like I said, I didn't have a problem with Lindor stealing the first inning, but the fifth inning one trying to steal third, that was just, for me, that was dumb.
Yeah, no, that part I agree with. I just look at it as, I would like for them to cut back a bit, because it's like, then you're going to catch teams off guard, especially come playoff time, when you really want to utilize the stolen base game and you really need it more. That was kind of my thought process on that. But yeah, I mean, just in terms overall with the offense, like, it's just disappointing that, the other thing too is, guys that you thought were starting to really find their rhythm and heat up just didn't carry it over. Like, for example, Marte, how many times did he come up in clutch spots? Has he lately come up in clutch spots and not come through? Alvarez comes back from the IL, and we knew this was going to happen, where he's probably not going to look as sharp, but we have to judge you based on what we're getting. If you're going to play, we're going to judge you accordingly. He wasn't good enough. McNeil, I thought he was starting to heat up. He didn't look that great throughout the series as well. So it's like, even the things that we thought were starting to go right, this is where I get worried of, okay, the past few weeks when they were actually starting to hit, it might have just been an outlier compared to what they actually are. And that's the thing that sucks. And they have a chance to prove me, you, and everyone wrong down the stretch here, which they better. But it just worries me right now that the bottom of the order now all of a sudden is starting to fade away, on top of the fact that Alonso has not come through, on top of the fact that Nimmo has not come through. And then, defensively with him as well has just been a disaster. But yeah, it's just like, you're seeing guys that it looked like maybe we're starting to find a rhythm, and you were getting the contributions 1 through 9. Now you're not getting that over the past couple of games here, between the last game of the Tiger series and this Red series. But that to me was one of the biggest frustrating things.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, again, it's one of those reasons why, like for me especially, like whenever they have these games, or whenever they have these little stretches of them, putting up 7, 8, 10 runs, it's one of those reasons why I don't get too excited. But then whenever I see these games where they struggle to put up 2 to 3 runs, or even 1 run, it's like I really don't get too under the moon, just because, again, like, it's been 4 years with this group. We've seen all the tendencies. We've seen all the patterns with this team. Like, I know that they're capable of having these stretches where they're hot and they're amazing and they're hitting for power and they're putting up so many runs in these games. But then it's like also we've seen the fact that then they have these stretches where the offense just can't get anything going. They revert back to their old style of not being able to hit with run scoring position. And it's like again like all these things are about timing because it's like cool. It's really cool the fact that you're putting up these type of stretches in late August and early September. But then if that's not going to come around to October time, then and especially like again, where you're going to face good teams, with very good offenses, and we know that this pitching staff hasn't necessarily been good. And then we know those other teams have good pitching staffs as well, and and they have those ace caliber pitchers. Then because again, this team at least for this year, I know maybe like lately you could say okay maybe the pitching is going to have a say of how far they go, but ultimately it still comes down to how well this lineup hits. It's going to determine how far they go in the playoffs. Because I think with some of the younger arms, I think you could mask over some of the pitching problems, considering that they're going to shorten the rotation to 3 to 4 guys come playoff time, and obviously we'll see what happens with the bullpen if some guys start to pick up their form, and obviously we have a couple guys come off the IL, notably Reed Garrett, who came off the IL yesterday, and he looked good in his first outing. But ultimately, like I said, it's about how well this lineup hits, and if they're going to show what they showed in late August, where they're putting up all these runs and they're hitting for power, it's like cool. Okay, maybe I could see them making a deep run, but if we're going to get out of this offense what we've seen over in the series specifically, then I have a hard time seeing them beat teams like the Padres, like the Cubs, like the Phillies, even though they've had their numbers, and then the Dodgers as well, even though they've been struggling. But it's like ultimately, it's like we said, this lineup is going to determine how far they go.
Yeah, because the thing that I pointed out even last episode, like the silver lining with the pitching is as much as they're not giving volume, at least you don't need that as much in the playoffs because once you get there, you could tag team these starters or you could, leave some starters off the roster and really expand what you have in the bullpen. But, in regards to the lineup, it's just like that you need to see consistency with down the stretch here because Soto said himself, it's a matter of who starts to heat up down the stretch here. That's usually the team that wins it. And I'm not seeing the Mets showing tendencies of being that team right now. At least with the pitching, there are positives. Like Peterson had a horrible start, but like the young guys, and I had someone in my replies too with the Tong thing, just to talk about Jonah Tong right now. I had someone in my replies because I tweeted out, even though Tong had a bad start, he still did so much better than the veterans that did. He's like, oh, well, yeah, obviously he went 6 innings instead of 3 or 4. You're an idiot if you think it's just simply about, the innings in general, which obviously that's a big part of it because this team is starving for innings. But it's the fact that he's able to actually adjust to help him get those innings because early on, he did not have his command really at all with his breaking stuff, and he was just pounding fastballs, and eventually the Reds caught up to it. But then later on, you started to see him go back to the breaking stuff a little bit, adjust, and actually get those outs. And that to me is really what told me a lot more about Tong than anything. And, I still don't have a good feel about him right now. Obviously, in the future, I think he's going to be a stud going forward. But like for the short term right now, I don't know how to feel. But I still look at him in a better light than any of these veterans, despite the 4 walks, despite the home runs that he allowed, because of those adjustments, because he still was able to give you 6 innings despite those runs. Where Peterson, I mean, no adjustments, or Holmes especially. Holmes is the king of not adjusting at all throughout his starts, and that part's frustrating. But to me, just like I'm so annoyed with, the Tong conversation, people just like ripping the kid, which I get that there's pressure because you're seeing McLean do what he's doing with the fact that, but it's the fact that Tong was the higher regard prospect, so people expect more. But it's just unfair to him that he has these expectations but he still has not even looked bad in my opinion.
No, it annoys me with Tong because especially like on Twitter and listen, with people on Twitter, you shouldn't really take too much stock into them because it's mostly a bunch of dumb cunts anyway on there. Just being overreactive to every single little thing. It's more the fact that just people are not looking at the context between Tong and McLean because even we said this like because listen, what McLean is doing right now with the fact that he's won his first 4 games and most of the time he's looked dominant in those first 4 games. It's unfair to expect the same thing out of Jonah Tong right away. And listen, and because people are going to say like, oh, Tong is the higher regarded prospect. He should be going out there and he should be doing better than McLean. It's like, okay, but that's only one factor. Sure, Jonah Tong is the more highly rated prospect. I get that 100%. But people fail to look at the context to where Noel McLean is 2 years older than Jonah Tong. McLean's 24 years old. Tong is 22 years old. So McLean right away has more seasoning under his belt. And second of all, Nolan McLean has had way more starts in AAA and has had way more experience in terms of professional baseball than Jonah Tong. So it's like, and listen, like Jonah Tong, like okay, he wasn't the greatest in his outing, but he still gave you a respectable outing, in my opinion. And listen, do you want to see him go out there and give up 3 runs, most notably on the fastball? No, absolutely not. But let's calm down a little bit. The kid is 22 years old. He's going to make adjustments. He's going to be fine. And listen, Jonah Tong doesn't have a bad fastball just because he gave up 3 homers on his fastball. It's not about that. It's about the fact that and again, this is going to come more with experience. This is going to come more with with Hefner and the other pitching coaches more working with him at the major league level. It's the fact that he needs to incorporate more of his arsenal into his outings because okay, cool. Listen, I think Tong has a very good fastball. Maybe not so much in terms of velo because in terms of modern day baseball, a 96, 97 velo on your fastball is not exactly like electric. But I think the thing that you see with Tong's fastball is he gets very good movement on it. But again, when you're only mixing 2 or 3 pitches, like you're going to get exposed on that because at the major league level, you're facing better hitters. Like, listen, you could get away with that at the minor league level because you're not facing the best competition out there. But when you're getting towards the major league level, you have to start incorporating 4, 5 pitches. You really can't rely on 3, 2 pitches unless like your 2, 3 pitches are elite. It's like it's like what I bring up all the time with Jacob DeGrom. Like DeGrom could get away with throwing a fastball and a slider only in his outings because his fastball and his slider are that elite. But with Tong, listen, like I said, Tong is good stuff. He just needs to work on a few more things. It's all about making adjustments. And again, it's his second major league start. He's going to be fine. And even then, like even in that outing, you start to see him make adjustments because earlier in that game, he was really only throwing fastball and changeups. But then later on in the game, we start to see him implement the slider and the curveball. And then, when he mixed in those 2 other pitches with his 4-seamer and his changeup, that's when you start to see him get, to get better results against the Reds lineup. So ultimately, for me, Jonah Tong is going to be fine. Like, to me, people going out there and because I saw people saying, oh, Tong's nothing special. Tong's not that great. I'm like, bro, like the kid's 22 years old. He's making his second start at the major league level. Like, people relax. And listen, and listen, this is another thing. I don't think Tong would have all this pressure on him to begin with if the other veteran starters in this pitching rotation would just go out there and give you 6 to 7 innings of work of only 2 to 3 run ball at a consistent rate. But then again, you're not seeing that with guys. Peterson, his last 2 starts, has not been great. Clay Holmes has been, here or there. Holmes really, he gives you his typical start where it's most notably, like 5 innings of work and, 3 to 4 runs of baseball, or maybe even, he gives you 2 runs here and there. But then even we saw it Senga, he got sent down to AAA. We'll probably, touch upon that when Evan comes back. Shamanaya, again, I think that's an injury. I think that's an injury issue per se, because again, like he looks great early in the starts, but then he starts to dip down. So ultimately, I think the Tong thing, it's all about context, and people just have to lay off the kid a little bit. Kid's gonna be fine.
Yeah, like this comment says here, McLean is the exception, not the rule. Can't expect every prospect to set the world on fire. And it's true. And I also think there's also the fact that, we saw back in the day guys like DeGrom come up and have immediate success. Guys like Syndergaard, Mats, all these guys come up and have immediate success. Harvey. And now it's kind of, when you see someone not light the world on fire that way, but still look good enough, it's like, oh, he's no good. It's ridiculous to me. I do think that now Brandon Sproat's last start definitely, you know, puts more pressure on Tong because Sproat looked good as well. So I think people are going to be a little more unfair. I really like Brandon Sproat's start. He went out there 6 innings, 3 earned runs, 4 walks, 7 strikeouts. Didn't have his command really throughout this time early on. Beatty helped him with a really good defensive play in that first inning to help him, get out of that. But I thought he did a really good job of battling through certain adversity, especially in that fourth inning where he allows a leadoff walk and Noelvi Marte steals a bag. He could have easily folded there, but he gets out of it, allowing 1 run. I thought his curveball looked excellent, though. Like the
Yeah.
amount of times that he was getting, he only got 2 swing and misses on it, but I felt like he was freezing hitters. Yeah, because he had 3 called strikes as well on that pitch. He did a really good job, in my opinion, at locating that. And he doesn't have the overpowering fastball, so he was never gonna, really utilize that a lot. But I really love the way he just simply mixed his pitches. Like to me, that was what I wanted to see from him overall, just because a lot of his stuff kind of grades out as average outside of a few pitches that are above average. But a very encouraging first start, especially in a stadium that is not easy to pitch in. Like that's the other thing that we didn't even talk about with Tong as well. He's pitching in a bandbox. Like outside of, you know, a couple other stadiums, it is not easy. Outside of like Coors Field, Great American Ballpark might be like the second hardest ballpark to pitch in because of how much the ball flies out of there. And, we saw that mostly with Tong's start, but I thought Sproat did a really good job, all things considered. And again, it sucks because he kept them in a great spot to win the game. And, Reed Garrett comes back, does a good job. Rogers does a good job out of the pen. But this offense, where were they?
Yeah, just to touch upon Sproat's outing, I thought Sproat was solid for the most part. I mean, like I said, gives you 6 innings of work, which is again something that we've been desperate for, with just with these veterans not being able to give you that. 3 runs, well, like I said, 3 runs, 3 hits. I don't have a problem with. I love the 7 Ks. Like I agree with you. His curveball was excellent. Like again, he didn't get a ton of swing and miss on that, but he was able to just freeze a ton of hitters and place it really well in the strike zone to be able to freeze hitters. Like you're saying, like he racked up 7 strikeouts. I liked his slider slash his sweeper command. I thought that was good. Again, he was able to rack up a decent amount of swings and misses as well. I did not love his fastball command though. That was a pitch he really struggled with. It was struggled with in this outing, and right away you could see it from the first batter with TJ Friedl because his first 3 pitches were fastballs, and he missed them all arm side. And then the fourth inning he came back and I mean, not in the fourth inning, the fourth pitch of that bat again, he ended up walking him on a fastball, and I believe he missed that on the low and inside. But the other thing I did not like about Sproat's outing was the four walks. I don't love in general. It's more though the situation of those walks, because again, and I talked about this yesterday in the post game. There's 2 times where you want to avoid walks. It's walking the leadoff guy, and then walking someone when there's 2 outs in the inning. And 3 of 4 Sproat's walks were walking the leadoff guy, because he walks TJ Friedl, the first batter of the game. He walks Tyler Stevenson, the first batter in the third inning. Those first 2 didn't come back to bite him. But then the fourth inning, or he walks Noelvi Marte to lead off that inning, that came around to bite him, because he ended up being the first run for the Reds and ended up being the tying run. And even then, like that's just more of a situation, or not even a situational thing, but that's just more of like I said, with a command issue, and more of an adjustment thing. And again, like again, with young hitters, I'm not going to be too overreactive apart from them, not having maybe the greatest adjustments right away or the greatest location right away, because again, it was his first start. He was probably a little nervous as well. But again, like with more experience and with as Sproat, as he pitches more, he's going to get better, location and stuff, and he's going to make better adjustments. But yeah, even like I said with the fastball, because I mean, when you look at it, like he threw 11 fastballs, 18% were in the zone. So again, like he has to be better with his fastball. And again, like you said, it's not an overpowering fastball, but even still, when you don't have an overpowering fastball, you have to make sure that you are locating that pitch in the strike zone consistently. Because if not, then opposing lineups are just going to lay off of that, and that's what the Reds were doing. And they were laying off the fastball, but then when Sproat started mixing in, like I said, with his breaking stuff, with his curveball, with his slider, with the slider and a sweeper, that's when you really start to see him, take the next step, and that's where you start to see him, rack up those 7 strikeouts. But overall, like I said, I don't have a problem with Sproat's start. I thought, he went out there and he pitched very well.
Yeah, the only thing that really helped out with the fact that he couldn't locate the fastball is that at least his sinker location was a little bit better. Still didn't find the zone enough with it, but it at least helped him get by a little bit more with the outing. But also, just to build on the thing that you said with the walks, I'll give you one more thing that's inexcusable. Walking the 9-hitter is one of my biggest pet peeves in baseball. So I had to add that there because every time that happens, it pisses me off so much. But uh nonetheless, yeah, I mean, Sproat, in terms of when he's lined up for his next outing as well, just to figure that out, because I'm not sure how they're gonna go about the rotation. I don't know if they're gonna make changes, but I think he's lined up to pitch Saturday versus the Rangers next, which would be a home start for him. I mean, at some point he's gonna start at home during the stretch, but I think he's lined up for that Saturday game against the Rangers. So we'll see. I mean, it's gonna be a better lineup as well. So definitely going to be a huge test for him going forward. And that's another thing too, by the way, just because the rest was giving me a thought. Um, with Tong, I mean, we didn't talk about enough as well. And I brought this up in my post game. Going 8 days between starts couldn't have been easy as well from his major league debut, nonetheless. Like, it is not easy to go that long without a start. And it felt like it was an eternity just as a fan. So for him, it must have been, really difficult as well. But now he's going to get to go out there on Friday, get another chance on 6 days of rest. So we'll see how he fares in that one. We'll see how Sproat fares in his next start as well. But in terms of starting pitchers, which before I segue to this, but do you have anything else you want to talk about with the series as a whole?
Um, I think the only other thing we can touch upon again is Mendy's lack of bullpen management, because again, seeing him utilize Stanek the way he did again, it's just why. But again, I really shouldn't be surprised, because this is something we've seen throughout the whole year. And listen, I get that there's going to be fans out there saying that, oh, but it worked in the first game of this series, so why are you criticizing Mendy for using him in the second game in that exact same spot? Well, first of all, one, more than and I can't even have words, because I just keep like getting flustered by he keeps doing this. But it's like, more often than not, whenever Stanek is brought into this same exact situation, he fails more than he succeeds. And it's like, okay, cool, you got away with it in the first outing, but you're down by 2 runs in that game, in the second game of the series. Why are you bringing in Stanek again? Because like I said, more often than not, Stanek fails in those spots than he does come through. And then we saw it. He ends up giving up the 5th run. They're down 5-2, and then right away the game ended. But then even with how then Mendy managed the third game in the series, it's like, again, you're down 3-1 going into the 7th and 8th inning, and then I see him utilize guys like Tyler Rogers and Reed Garrett. So, and listen, I get that Reed Garrett wasn't available in that second game, and maybe Tyler Rogers wasn't available in that second game either, because he pitched the first game of the series. But why not use Gregory Soto? And again, I know that Gregory Soto hasn't been great. I still trust him more than Ryan Stanek. And listen, I wouldn't kill Mendy then in that situation if he used Gregory Soto and Gregory Soto came up short, because again, you're using your quote unquote better pitcher. You're using a guy that you actually give up assets to go acquire him at the trade deadline. So at that point, if Mendy just uses him in that spot, I'm like, okay, I can't kill Mendy because he used the best pitcher in that spot. But when you go back to Ryan Stanek and you're playing with fire and asking for trouble, then it's like, okay, then I have to kill you, because why do you keep going to them? Why do you keep going to him in the same exact spot?
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's a broken clock is right twice a day situation with this, where it's like I don't care that it worked one time. I don't care that it was right one time, the clock. That doesn't mean you rely on it again. And to me, there was no excuse to not use Rogers or Rayleigh in that spot. You had an off day the day before the first game. Rayleigh, we've seen pitch back to back days a bit now. He only threw 12 pitches in that last appearance in the first game of the series. Tyler Rogers only threw 11. You're telling me those guys weren't available, but Ryan Stanek, who threw 14 pitches, so he threw more than both of them, he was available, but those guys weren't? Nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. And if the mindset was, oh, we got to save them for game 3, then that counters the thing that I have brought up time and time again that he brought up on Foul Territory when he was interviewed, where he said, yeah, we don't look at the next game. We got to focus on the game right now and do our best to win the game at hand. Okay, then where was that attitude in that game? To me, that just made no sense. And I'm tired of talking about poor managerial decisions. It's just like I said, one of the things that could cost them in the playoffs is his lack of awareness with certain situations and not being aware enough with zone guys. It scares me, but nonetheless, to talk about the starting pitching again a little bit, we did end up getting the news about Kodai Senga going down to AAA. So, we talked about how last episode, is he going to decline to go down or what? He ended up accepting the option, which I appreciate him doing as well, because he could have been stubborn and said, no, I want to pitch on the big league roster. So we'll see if he could get right down in the minor leagues. They need him to desperately. I don't know if I'm counting on it that much, but we will see. But overall, your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, I'm very happy, and I appreciate the fact that he accepted his demotion to AAA, because listen, he was hurting the team, and even he knows that, because Senga has stated multiple times when he's not pitching well, because again, like I've talked about before, like Senga is like a perfectionist. Like he always talks about how like his body needs to feel 100% right for him to pitch well. And listen, if his body is not feeling well, whether that's just he's mechanically off or maybe he's injured, then it's right for him. And like I said, I appreciate the fact that that he took the step back, he took his demotion, and he said, okay, listen, I'm not pitching well right now. I'm gonna go down to AAA, gonna go down to Syracuse. I'm going to, work on myself, see if I can, make these slight improvements, slight adjustments, and then, hopefully the guys on the major league roster, they keep winning. And then hopefully, if I'm able to make those adjustments and I'm ready, I could go up there come playoff time, or even, even if he comes back, with 2 to 3 weeks left in the season, he said, okay, I can come back and I can make an instant impact on this roster, with, giving this team, reliable starts in the starting rotation. But even though, like I said, like I'm not 100% confident that's going to happen. But listen, like for Senga's sake, if he's still going down there in AAA and he's still having bad outings and his body's still not feeling right, then he should just shut himself down for the season, because there is no point of putting him on the playoff roster if he's just going to be an unreliable piece. Because at that point, I'd rather just have Tong, Sproat, or McLean take a spot on the roster at that point, and at least have a guy that's shown that they could go out there and give you 6 innings of reliable baseball. Listen, like I said, it doesn't change the fact that I still appreciate Senga doing this, but he really has to, it's really put up or shut up time for him now in AAA. He has to, like I said, he has to make those adjustments. He has to be better, and if not, then he should just, really do himself the favor and just, shut himself down for the season and just say, okay, like the full focus is on next year, because like I said, there is no point of having him on the major league roster if he's just going to be, going out there and being inconsistent and only giving you 4 to 3 runs of baseball or 4 to 3 innings of baseball, where he's giving up 4 or 5 runs. It's just it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into this conversation more during the offseason, but we kind of alluded to it last episode that, I do wonder if he's even going to be here next year potentially. But again, we'll talk about that at another time. But yeah, I mean, he's got to get right. He'll probably start Wednesday or Thursday for Syracuse because they have today off, and then tomorrow they already announced a different pitcher to start. So we'll see if, or actually, no, they've not. They haven't. Sorry, that was Boston's team that did. So maybe there's a chance he starts tomorrow. We'll see about that. I'd imagine he would because it's been a while since he's pitched, but time will tell on that one. But with that said, the Mets have a 4-game set coming up now against the Philadelphia Phillies, in which if they want any last hope of the division, you have to sweep. Like there's no three winning 3 games. There's no chance if you win 2. Like you have to sweep if you want to win the division. And I can tell you right now, prove me wrong, but it's not going to happen. They're not going to sweep the series. Uh, in terms of the pitching matchups tonight, Noah McLean versus Aaron Nola. That's a 6:45 start. A couple of them here, which is so weird and
Yeah,
dumb to me. But either way, Sean Manaea versus Ranger Suarez for game number 2. Game number 3, Clay Holmes versus Christopher Sanchez, who the Mets beat up a little bit last time. And then David Peterson will start the last game. I don't know who the Phillies are going to start. Maybe that's Taiwan Walker lined
probably,
up
I would
for
assume.
that game. I don't know who else it would be. I'm trying to remember who, or Luzardo. It's going to be one
Yeah,
of those
Lozano,
two.
yeah.
So it might actually be Luzardo because I think the Mets face a good amount of lefties this series. So I'm expecting them to split. Prove me wrong, but if I was to make a prediction, they're going to split.
Yeah, listen, with the division thing, I didn't expect them even when the Mets swept the Phillies back a couple weeks ago at Citi Field. I still didn't expect them to win the division either way, just because the Phillies had to drop a ton of games, and then the Mets had to go on a long winning streak as well. And even then, the Phillies have picked up games here and there, and then even then the Mets have kind of been a kind of like a 500 team, and they've been 500 on this road trip so far with winning the Tiger series and then dropping this Red series. So they've been 3-3 so far in the 6 games that they play on the road so far. So, like I said, to me the division was already a long shot, and now I mean pretty much the division is all but pretty much wrapped up. I mean, listen, do they still have a shot even if they sweep the Phillies? Sure, but then even then the Mets have a lot of tough opponents coming up, on their schedule with going to Chicago, with them playing the Rangers, with them playing the Padres. So even if they were to sweep the Phillies, which I don't think is going to happen, because again it's at Citizens Bank Park, and the Phillies do tend to play better against the Mets when the games are at Citizens Bank Park. But listen, for me, I just want them to go out and win series. I hope that they go out there and they win 3 out of 4. I mean, I hope them. I wish they would sweep. I don't think it's going to happen, but hopefully they win 3 out of 4. But like you, I probably expect them to split the series at 2 apiece.
Yeah, and like even if they do sweep, just to talk about the division for a second, if we're gonna play pretend here that it's realistic, but um, yeah, like the schedules just aren't in their favor. The Mets still play the Rangers, they play the Padres, they play the Cubs, and even the Marlins worry me. Where the Phillies, they play the Royals. The Dodgers will be a tough set for them. They play the Diamondbacks. Kind of weird that they get a very late West Coast trip in the season. But then they play the Marlins and they play the Twins. Like it's not a crazy schedule for the Phillies down the stretch. To me, the Phillies just have to win like if they end up splitting here, I think that the division's pretty much wrapped up at that point. Like unofficially official. I'm not sure the math for clinching the division at that point. I guess we'll see after the series what the magic number would be. I mean, I could look it up real quick just to see what the Phillies magic number to win the division is. It would be if I could find it real quick here, but it would be where is it? 13. It'd be 13, but obviously if they go in there and sweep the Mets, which hopefully that doesn't happen, then that number drops like a lot drastically. So we will see what ends up happening. But thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.